Well, thank you everyone for attending. It's our first Wednesday with Wing webinar of 2021, which is excellent. And we're going to kick it off with something a little bit different this year. So we're doing a skill session, which is going to be run by Maddy on how to present like a pro, or everything that she's learned thus far. So I'm going to hand it over to Maddy and yeah, enjoy.
Brilliant, thank you, Lucy. I'll just start sharing my screen. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining today and listening to my presentation. So today I'll be giving a presentation on sort of tips and tricks for effective presenting. So I'm Maddy. So just to introduce myself, this will work. Okay. Okay, so just before we begin, I'd like you all to take sort of just 30 seconds, just have a think about a memorable presentation that you've attended. So thinking about what made it a good presentation and what made it a good presenter. So if you can just have that one in mind, and we'll come back to it in the next couple of slides. So today I'm going to be sharing with you some tips and tricks, including for virtual presenting. And so just to sort of give you a bit of a background. So I'm Maddy, I work for Geoscience Limited within the geothermal team. I'm a geologist and I work as a technical assistant within the team. So I'm also part of the Wing UK committee as convener, and I joined Greenpeace last September. So I work with the Greenpeace Falmouth and Penryn local group, and last September I joined as a Greenpeace speaker. So I went through sort of a series of online training sessions and workshops. So that included sort of different presentations from some of the existing speakers, skill sessions and things like that, and group presentations. And so since being accepted as a speaker, I've been delivering presentations to a range of audiences, including sort of schools. And one of the sort of most memorable was last November. I gave a presentation for the Youth Climate Summit. So this was one where we pre-recorded our talk, and then schools across the UK could sort of tune in and listen to these on the day. So with a partner, I hosted one of the sessions. So that was one of the first sort of things I've done as a Greenpeace speaker. And I think through this training, and also through presentations I gave at university as part of my degree, and through starting work with Geoscience Limited and also with Wing, I've picked up a lot of things along the way. And so today I'm going to share with you what I've learned so far, and a few tips and tricks, particularly given we're now sort of presenting in this virtual world. Okay, so I think just before we move on, something I'd like to emphasize is a presentation is never going to be perfect. So there's always going to be room for improvement, and you will always make mistakes at some point, but that's absolutely fine. I think the more practice you do, the better you get. This is something I've definitely learned, even since starting with geoscience. I remember some of the very first presentations I gave, and I've definitely sort of improved and picked a few things up since then. So there's always things to learn, you're always improving. And I think particularly for any university students listening in, while you're at university, presenting is, for me at university, was something that was part of the curriculum. So we had to do this as part of some of our assessments. And I think that's such a great opportunity for practice and for improvement. You know, use your colleagues and use your lecturers for advice and to practice your presentations with. It's a really useful opportunity before you go into industry and sort of begin your career within an organisation. So these are just some examples of some presentations. This was at the London Symposium. I'm not sure if these images are coming up. Okay, so just to give you an overview of the talk today, I'm hoping this is coming up. I think it's a little bit slow. So first, I'll just give you a bit of context. So sort of communication is a key skill, particularly for geoscientists within the energy transition. And then we'll go into what makes a good presentation, what makes a good presenter, designing a good presentation, and then finally presenting in this sort of new virtual world. So communication. So for me, and I think this is something that's really been talked about a lot, particularly in the past year, it's a key skill for geoscientists. So this could be, through a research project, so something you've been studying, and you've got to deliver some key data and findings and conclusions on a project. It could be communicating your ideas and thoughts and your opinion within your company or within your organisational committee. So, for example, for me, through Wing and through Greenpeace and in the company with Geoscience. And also outreach and education. I think this is a really important part of your work as a geoscientist. So it could be a project you're involved with, or going in and speaking to schools and things like that. So there's a lot of different methods of communication, types of communication, types of presentations. And it's really important skill as a geoscientist. So geoscientists for the energy transition. So geoscientists play a really, really crucial part in this energy transition. So we have a responsibility as stewards within the global energy transition. So we have the expertise and the skills to drive this transition. So we've studied these subjects, but actually the important part is communicating this in appropriate language and ways to everybody. So these new technologies and sort of concepts that are being developed, so for example, like geothermal, aren't familiar to everyone. And so geoscientists really play a crucial role in delivering this information in ways that everybody can understand. And it's important to engage everyone in these projects and new developments. So for example, through community outreach and education. So this could be a geothermal project, for example, and you need to engage everybody within that community, all ages, everybody in that community. And it's also really important in educating and inspiring that next generation of geoscientists. So I think at the moment there's this sort of negative perception around geology and geoscience, particularly with the movement towards climate targets and things like that. And so we need to educate the next generation into understanding the role of geoscientists in this movement towards a decarbonised, sustainable future. Apologies if this is a bit of a delay. Okay, hopefully that'll show now. Okay, so what makes a good presentation? So at the start, I asked you to think about a good presentation, a memorable presentation that you've attended. So now I want you to think about what made that a good presentation. So I think if we can use the chat box now, and you can put your answers in the chat box, any thoughts or comments you have on what made that a good presentation. So feel free to enter any comments, and then we'll move on. I think you should all have access to the box. Yeah, spoken, Hester, yes, well explained the concept. Yeah, good story. Definitely enthusiastic. I think that's a really good point, Lucy. Personal connection, definitely. I think it's good to have a presenter that's sort of relatable and yeah, have that connection with. Engaging, relatable, enthusiastic, definitely. I think engaging is the most important, yes. Okay, so moving on. Yeah, so the elements I picked out for a good presentation, so engaging being my top. So I think it's really important giving a presentation to engage your audience. You need to make it interesting. You need to make sure that yes, they're engaged in what you're delivering, and it needs to be focused. It needs to be clearly laid out and structured so that your audience can clearly follow your presentation flow. It needs to be concise and to the point, easy to understand, and appropriate to your target audience. So using the correct language. Your target audience will have sort of different experiences within the topic you're delivering. So for example, if I was delivering a topic on geothermal, so my audience may come from a range of different backgrounds and different sort of professions, and they'll have different previous experiences with that topic. So it's important to deliver using the right language and and sort of, you may need to simplify it, or you may be able to use that technical language. So it's making it appropriate. And interactive, I think this is a really important part. So this is something I'll try and include today in my presentation. So it's engaging the audience in your presentation, grabbing their attention and holding their attention. And particularly, I think this is an important aspect of virtual presenting, because you can't be there and making eye contact with your audience. Instead, you have to do it through a screen. So it's thinking about ways that you can still involve the audience. And also inspiring. So when I think of a good presentation, I think of something that I've been to and been inspired to act on at the end. So it could be something that's a problem, they then presented the solution and how you can actually act on that. So this has been particularly relevant with my Greenpeace presentations I've given. So it might be that I'm talking to a group of school children, and I will present the problem and sort of present why it matters and a solution, and then how they can actually act on that. So it's something that inspires you to act on, or to sort of read up on more and further your knowledge on. Okay, so now I want you to have to think about what made that presentation you remembered, what made them a good presenter. So again, share your ideas in the chat box. So think about why were they a particularly good presenter. So similar ideas, I imagine. Yeah, confident, really good point. Yeah, spoke fluently, great point. Yeah, brilliant, some really good points. Okay. So when I think of a good presenter, these are the key elements that I think of. So firstly, engaging. Secondly, enthusiastic, passionate, confident, clarity, so clear, concise, to the point, and energy. So looking at engaging and sort of passionate, when I give a presentation, I think particularly on something that interests me, so climate, energy, and these sorts of things, sustainability, I think it's easy because it's something I'm particularly passionate about, and I want my audience to be interested. I want them to care about the topic I'm talking about and act on that topic. So if it's climate, if it's energy, it's what changes they can make, these sorts of things. So I think it's really important when you're giving a presentation to try and channel, why are you passionate about that topic? Why do you want your audience to be interested in that topic? And yeah, how can you kind of engage them and get their attention? And confidence, I think, is a really big one. So when you give a presentation, you need to believe in and be confident in what you're delivering. In the end of the day, you're the person there that's the expert in your topic. So yes, you might be presenting to a technical audience, but you've done the study on your particular topic. So have confidence in what you're saying. And clarity. So your presentation needs to be to the point. It needs to be concise and clear for your audience to read and follow. And energy. So I think this is something that's been particularly difficult through virtual presenting. But you can still be dynamic. You can vary your voice. You can use your body language. There's so many different aspects. But being dynamic, having energy about you, and showing your interest in your subject area. So I think it's all very well to say be passionate, be energetic, dynamic, all these things, be engaging. And I'm sure you've heard that all before. I think particularly at university, I remember sort of getting advice on giving presentations, and these are the key points that came up, sort of these previous points I talked about here. But actually, how do you apply these? So I think one key point here is purpose. So when you're delivering and designing your presentation either, so think about the purpose of your presentation. So think about, why are you interested in this topic? Why is your topic important? Why does it matter? And why do you want your audience to be interested in this? And yeah, why should they be interested in it? And I think following on from that, the take-home messages. So I think a key point in designing your presentation is if you can come up with a few take-home messages for your audience. So when I'm putting together a presentation, I'll decide a few points that I really want my audience to go away and having kind of gained and learned from my presentation. I think that's a really good place to start. So I think particularly at university, there were times where we had to present on a topic that might not be your particular, topic that you're passionate about and really interested in. So for example, I know for a geoscience student, you have to give a dissertation presentation, for example. And a lot of times you may not be able to decide your own area for this study or your topic that you're going to present on. And so it can be quite hard to sort of channel your passion when it's not a topic you're really, really interested in. But I think, again, try and find an area within that you are interested in a little bit more. Try and understand the purpose of the topic and why it matters, or sort of focusing in a little bit more. And also practice and preparation. So this is really important. I think the more you practice, the more you familiarize yourself with the content of your presentation, the easier it is to present. So I think notes are useful. They are useful, but I think they're useful as prompts. So it's much easier to have familiarized yourself with the content and to have read through it a few times, rehearsed, and then they're there as prompts to help you, but actually your content so well that you're just talking about what you know. And I think confidence, again, really key. You're the expert in this topic. You're the one that knows the most about it, so have confidence in what you're saying. Body language is super important. So a good element of a good presenter is good body language, so dynamic, energetic. They want the audience to be engaged, so using your eye contact and voice as well, so you can vary your voice, the tone of your voice. You can use eye contact to engage with your audience in front of you, and sort of keep them interested. So looking around the room, not focusing on just a couple of familiar faces or something. But I think here, purpose and take-home messages are my top two. So at the end of the presentation, I think I'd quite like you all to have a think about what you think my take-home messages were. So if you could try and think of three, and I'll see if they sort of match what I had in mind. That would be interesting. But definitely purpose. I think it's very difficult if it's a topic that you've been assigned to deliver a presentation on. So try and have a think about that. It might not be something you're particularly passionate about, but try and get down to the purpose and why it's relevant, why it matters, and why your audience should be interested in it. And smile. I think that's super important. I think it helps you as a presenter, and it helps your audience engage with your presentation. They'll see a familiar face, a friendly face, approachable. And yes, it definitely helps you as a presenter. You feel sort of more positive and more confident. So now designing a good presentation. So I'm going to show you a couple of slides, and again in the chat box I'd like you to share your comments with me about what you think makes it a good or a bad slide. Okay, here we go. So the first one. So fire away in the chat box. What do you think makes this a good or a bad slide? Okay, some good points coming in. So we've got title, text, photo, the background, color of text. Yep, the font. All really good points. Small text, yes. Can't read the bottom line, yes. Definitely wordy. Okay, brilliant. Yes, a bad slide. We'll finish there. So I think a couple of things to pick out here. So firstly, images as a background, it's generally a no-go. So as you can see here, it distracts you from the text, and the text, is too much also and distracts you from the image. So images can be super useful if they're relevant and appropriate and represent something you're trying to say. But actually here, it has no value really. It's not particularly relevant for what I'm trying to say. Yes, it represents something to do with geothermal, But actually here you're talking about what is geothermal, sort of, you know, the sort of the original formation of the planet, the radioactive elements, is not really representing that. Also, the title is too big. It's the color doesn't work. You know, it contrasts with the rest of your slide here. The rest of the text is too small, so we've got no consistency going on here at all. It's too wordy, definitely. There's too much text here, so you've got sort of 3-4 sort of bullet points there, and that's too much for a slide, really. So usually try and keep it to just a few short bullet points. I think bullet points can be super useful and effective, but they should be purposeful as well, and not just sort of used to list. So yeah, a lot of points here. Also, another point is acronyms. So don't always assume that your audience understand the acronym you've used. Here I've used a very simple example. So it's the International Geothermal Association, but actually my audience might not be aware of what that stands for, the IGA. So just small things like that as well. Yes. And I think another point that I don't know if anybody's mentioned here, but also splitting the slide up. So here I've covered what is geothermal, but I've also covered the uses of geothermal. So I've talked about use for electrical power generation, as well as heating, cooling, direct uses. So that actually could come under a separate slide. So thinking about not trying to cram too much information in and splitting it so it's clearer. And you can always elaborate on points. So using your short and effective bullet points to actually use those as prompts. So when you're practicing your presentation, you can discuss these points and expand further. Okay, so the next slide. So this is a slide taken from one of my it was my Lisle Day presentation, I think, from last year at Royal Holloway. So again, please comment on what you think is good or bad about this slide. Yeah, some good points coming in. Yeah, easy to digest, clear, concise. Yeah. Yeah, some good points here. So I think looking back to the slide before, this is much clearer. So you've got images that represent the points you were trying to discuss. So you've got geo means earth, thermal means heat. So heat from the earth, so that's represented through images rather than text. It's taken out some of those bullet points. You've got a diagram that clearly explains temperature increases with depth. That's really helpful, and you can use that to expand on that point and what you want to say. You have still got a lot of text at the bottom here, so yes, you might not want to include that. It might be relevant, but it's better. The title's smaller, the whole slide is more consistent and easy to digest and much clearer. So here are some overall points to consider. So looking at structure, so when you're putting together a presentation, you want it to have a clear flow. You want your audience to clearly be able to follow along your presentation, and it needs to be sort of clearly laid out and structured. So this will vary on the type of presentation you're giving. So if it's a technical presentation, if it's from a research project, you might break it down into introduction, methodology, you know, your data, your findings, your conclusions, that sort of method. Or perhaps if it's, for example, some of the Greenpeace talks I've given, it's more sort of presenting the problem, explaining why does that matter, giving the solution, and then how someone can go and act on that. So it varies with the type of presentation you're giving and the audience. And also I think a good point to consider here is the age of your audience as well. So often when I've given presentations to school children, it's quite good to have that overview side so that they know what to expect and know what length of presentation to expect as well. So it helps them know what they're sort of what to expect and how long their attention is needed, sort of thing. So also text size, font quantity, so not overloading your slide with text. So just a few really key points to use as prompts to sort of expand on that you can discuss. Text size is really important, usually to sort of that you can discuss. Text size really important, so I'd say maybe 28, that sort of size. Not making it too small, so your audience needs to be able to see it clearly. I'm trying to keep things really important to digest. And effective bullet points. So there's no point in sort of just listing. They need to be effective. They need to be you know, making your points clearly. And these can be used as prompts rather than sort of using a script or notes. And also language, so really thinking about the language. So I sort of mentioned this before, it really depends on your audience. So yes, if you have a technical audience, all the sort of, you know, geology language that we're quite familiar with might be appropriate, but that might not be appropriate to an audience that come from a different profession or different background. So often in industry, you might have to present, for example, in an industry project like a geothermal project, you could be presenting to key stakeholders or investors or people in the community. So it really varies. So you need to vary your language accordingly and make it appropriate. So also looking at background. So like we mentioned with the image, try to keep quite a clear background and not overlapping text and images, things like that. Images can be really helpful, so they can be used to represent some of the text that you may have had, so points you're trying to say. They can be really effective. I think it helps to break up a presentation rather than having just masses of text. It also can, you know, draw in the attention of the audience, so it helps to engage the audience. Also using colour, so keeping that consistency and sort of appropriate colour. Those sorts of things, and the information included. So every bit of information you have in your PowerPoint should be purposeful. It should be there for a reason. So really thinking about what sort of information you include, the data you include, making sure it's all actually accurate as well, and checked over, things like that. Okay, so now going on to the second part. So I want to give you a few sort of tips and tricks I picked up along the way for presenting in a virtual world, which we're now sort of challenged with. So I think the last presentation I gave was in person was last February for Lisle Day at Royal Holloway. And I think for me, this has been something I've really missed. I definitely feel presenting on something I'm passionate about, like climate and energy, sustainability. I get a real kick from presenting in person. I like to engage with the audience, make, you know, good eye contact. I like to see them interested in what I'm passionate about and what I'm delivering. And I think that's incredibly hard to do through a screen. You know, I can't see any of you right now. I'm not sure if you're still, you know, still here, still listening. It's really difficult. So I think trying to figure out ways of still engaging with your audience and still sort of keeping them interested in what you have to say. So we'll look at different things now, but one of them is ways of interacting. So today I'm trying to use the chat box a little bit to allow you to be engaged with the presentation, so things like that. Also, you can sort of get people thinking about elements before. So for example, today I could have put out an email and said, please come with, you know, a presentation in mind, a memorable presentation, or could have shared some resources with you to have a look at before we started. So things like that to sort of get your audience engaged. But I think for me, that's definitely something I've really missed. And also it's the sort of discussions afterwards. So after a presentation, I remember, you know, a few students came up and had a chat with me, and you're able to sort of talk a little bit more and that sort of thing. So it's definitely different, it's a challenge, but I think that everything that we've gone through so far in the presentation today still applies, and it's just certain elements maybe need to be emphasised more. So some points to consider. So computer positioning and setup is really important. So for example, today I've got my computer so you can see my whole face and my shoulders. That allows you to use your body language, you know, use your hands and things like that to be more engaging. Also thinking about lighting and a clear setup. So today I've got quite a plain background. I've got quite bright colours on so that you can clearly see me when I'm presenting. So I'm not sort of mixed in with the background. The lighting's quite good. So you don't want a light behind you. You don't want it to be too dark. You also don't want a light right in your face to sort of just, you know, so you can't see your face very clearly. You also need to think about environment. So environment is super important. So today I've made sort of, you know, it's difficult working at home, but I've made the house aware that I'm giving a presentation. You know, I've got a quiet room. You know, I've set my computer up, things like that beforehand, and sort of try to make sure things are all working, microphone, make sure the technology is working. So it's important to sort of prepare before. Also, just something else, I think coming on beforehand onto a call, so onto a meeting, is really important. So that warm-up stage, that sort of familiarizing yourself with your audience, you know, through discussions before you start, that sort of thing can sort of help you prepare for giving your presentation and make you sort of more comfortable, less nervous, that sort of thing. So the preparation stage, super important. So yeah, checking over, making sure everything's working. So you've got, you know, you have none of those technical barriers. I think that's something that can really mess up your start of a presentation and sort of disrupt your flow. So important to sort of have looked at prior to starting. And also, so what about what you look like? So I've said about bright colours. I said about using body language as well to help be engaging. Also what you sound like, so trying to vary your tone of voice, so try to be a bit more dynamic in your voice is really helpful. And the other one, interaction with the audience. So I've mentioned that you can do this through use of the chat box, use of giving reactions, so you know, thumbs up or something like that, whereas in person you might have said hands up or asked certain questions. You won't get the same reaction to questions through a virtual screen. So you need to be a bit more you know, find new ways of doing that. So that's just some ideas. So chat box and maybe some different resources, so either prior to your presentation or to give out afterwards, so that you can go and learn more about what you're delivering. So now just a few tips and tricks. So I'm mostly familiar with Zoom. That's the one I've used mostly over the last year. And through Greenpeace, we've been exploring different sort of ways that you can present either your PowerPoint presentation or Google Slides and things through Zoom. So there's lots of different tools you can use on this. It's really, really useful. So the first one is sort of presenting your PowerPoint with your notes still visible. So today I don't have any notes visible, but you can actually share your presentation and have them at the bottom when as you were designing your presentation, where they're written at the bottom, so everybody can see just your presentation, but you can actually still see your notes. The same with Google Slides, you can have them on the left and still be able to view them whilst presenting, and the audience won't see it. So there's different things like that you can do. So I'll show you a few of those now. So the first one, presenting a PowerPoint with notes visible to you. So on Zoom, if you go on share screen, you have the option of sharing your screens, is the basic one there. There's also the advanced modes. So before sort of sharing, you can go onto the PowerPoint presentation and put it on presenter mode. So you can actually choose the setup on presenter mode, and so your notes are still visible. And when you share it, you'll just see that. You can also go onto the advanced mode and click portion of screen. So doing this, if you click that one there, you may also want to select the share computer sound as well. It's really important if you've got sort of different videos in your presentation, things like that. So make sure that one's clicked. And then you can actually select that portion just of your screen. So the only thing your audience will see is that green box, everything within the green box. And you can then still see your notes at the bottom. So that's super helpful. So that's one there. So the next one, presenting PowerPoint as a background. I really like this idea. I've used it a little bit with Greenpeace so far. So what you can actually do is I can have my presentation as my background today and just my face at the bottom corner. So a bit like this. So you go on, you select that, the advanced mode again, and onto PowerPoint and virtual background. And then you click your file that you want to share, and then it will put your face in front of the PowerPoint. So just like that. So that's quite nice as well. It means that you can have the full screen but you're there, and I think that's another way of trying to engage with the audience as well, when obviously we're having to do this virtually now, so that can be quite nice as well. The next one, so this is one of my presentations I gave for the Youth Climate Summit last year, and this is sort of sharing Google Slides with your notes. So if you go onto your Google Doc, onto your Google presentation, you can click the present button here and on presenter view. So then that will bring up sort of your slides, but also your notes and your presentation as a whole. And you can then go on to the share screen button again and select your presentation, but actually select the full presentation. So then when you come to present, they will be seeing your full screen, your presentation, and you can just see your notes and a tiny tab of the slides to the left. So that's also really helpful. That's quite a useful technique. Okay, so I think that is everything today. So just to summarize, I think geoscientists are really important communicators. So we're key to the energy transition, but everybody has a part to play in this. Everybody needs to be on board to allow for these new developments, new technologies and projects. So it's really important that we're able to communicate these effectively to everyone with all different backgrounds and professions. And yeah, effective communication is super key for the energy transition. And I think that Learn Usual has different expertise that we share these. And we're all unique and we all bring unique perspectives. So just a note to finish on. So I hope that was helpful today. So just a few tips and tricks I learned along the way and a bit of advice for presenting. Like I said, every presentation can have room for improvement, and you'd always make mistakes and wish it could have gone better. But you don't have to be an expert at it. It's a learning process, and the more you practice, the better you get. So yeah, that's all from me today. I hope that's helpful, and yeah, I would be interested to see what you think my sort of key messages are. Yes. So, and yeah, I think I'll end there, and any questions would be great. I'll end that now.
Hi, Maddy, that was great. Excellent presentation. Thank you so much. I mean, I don't know about anyone else, but I learned loads. Particularly useful was the virtual, like how to present virtually, because it's such a new thing. I see we've got a couple of questions in the chat box. So this is a really good one. How can you learn to be more confident?
I think it's something I'm still definitely learning. I think you're never going to be fully satisfied with your presentation and things like that. But the more that you familiarize yourself with the content, the more you know your stuff. So I think it's just practice, it's rehearsing. I think back to one presentation I was particularly proud of, and it was because I went into that room I was delivering the presentation in a few times before I gave it, and I familiarized myself with the room I was presenting in and where the audience would be, and just went over and over the content until you don't need your notes. So I think a certain amount of confidence comes with just familiarity of your content, but also just knowing nobody expects you to be the expert. You're always learning things. So yeah.
Yeah, it really is. A practice makes perfect, isn't it? Well, are there any other questions from anyone in the audience? No. Okay. Well, I'd like to say thanks again, because that was really excellent. And to all of you who are interested in our next Wednesday with Wing, we have Sabine from Heriot-Watt University presenting on the 17th of February on fracture permeability. So I will send out the link prior to that, but please come along and join in.